My name is Sarah, and I'm 32 years old. Behind my average appearance lies a secret: I make $1 million a month running my tech company. For over a year, I've been dating Nikita, a kind-hearted history teacher, who has no idea about my wealth. When he proposed with a modest ring he'd saved months to buy, I said yes, without hesitation. Now it's time to meet his family, and I've decided to play a little game. I'm pretending to be a simple girl from the countryside. But the moment I stepped through their front door, everything changed in ways I never expected. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button. If you've ever hidden part of yourself from your in-laws, trust me, you'll want to see how this wild ride ends. I didn't always have money. Growing up in a small town in Idaho, I watched my parents struggle paycheck to paycheck. Mum worked double shifts as a nurse, while Dad picked up whatever construction jobs he could find. We lived in a tiny 2-bedroom house that constantly needed repairs, and I wore hand-me-downs until I was old enough to work and buy my own clothes. But despite our financial struggles, my parents instilled in me the values of hard work, education, and determination. When I was 14, I discovered my passion for computers when our high school received a donation of outdated machines. While other kids saw clunky boxes, I saw potential. I spent hours in the computer lab after school, teaching myself programming from borrowed books and free online resources. My computer science teacher, Mr. Harrison, recognized my talent and became my mentor, often staying late to give me additional challenges and guidance. By 16, I was building websites for local businesses to save for college. My parents couldn't afford to send me to a fancy university, so I applied for every scholarship possible and worked throughout high school. When acceptance letters came, I chose State University with its generous financial aid package over more prestigious schools I couldn't afford. College was a balancing act of academics, jobs, and minimal sleep. I worked at the campus IT department during days, waited tables at night, and still managed to graduate top of my class in computer science. While other students partied, I was coding in my tiny apartment, dreaming of something bigger than the entry-level positions my classmates were competing for. My first job out of college was at Tech Global, a mid-sized company where I quickly became known as the problem solver. I worked 80-hour weeks and pitched innovative ideas, only to watch male colleagues with half my dedication get promoted over me. After 3 years of hitting glass ceilings, I was approached by Startup Inc., a growing tech firm offering better pay and more responsibility. The breakthrough came when I was working on a project involving user privacy. I noticed a fundamental flaw in how companies protected consumer data. They were reactive, not proactive. One sleepless night, the idea for Privacy Guard AI hit me: an artificial intelligence assistant that could predict and prevent privacy breaches before they happened. I pitched it to my bosses, but they dismissed it as too ambitious and not marketable enough. That rejection became my motivation. I quit my job, maxed out my credit cards, and converted my studio apartment into an office. For 18 months, I lived on ramen noodles and determination coding until my fingers cramped and my eyes burned. Friends thought I was crazy. Family worried I was throwing away a stable career, but I believed in my vision. The turning point came when a data breach scandal hit a major corporation, costing them billions. Suddenly, privacy was the hottest topic in tech. I managed to secure a meeting with their new CTO, who was desperate for solutions. My demonstration of Privacy Guard AI's capabilities left him speechless. By the end of the week, I had a 7-figure contract and was hiring my first employees. That was 5 years ago. Today, Privacy Shield Technologies serves 70% of Fortune 500 companies, and I've expanded into consumer privacy products. My net worth is in the 9 figures, but few people know it. I've deliberately kept a low profile, avoiding tech magazines and declining invitations to speak at high-profile conferences. My PR team ensures my name stays out of the spotlight, allowing the company's achievements to take center stage. Why the secrecy? Initially, it was practical. As a young female CEO, I faced enough skepticism without adding public scrutiny. But as success grew, I discovered another benefit to anonymity: authenticity in relationships. Before, when people discovered my wealth, their behavior changed. Friends expected lavish gifts, dates turned into financial negotiations, and family members I hadn't heard from in years suddenly needed loans. So I developed a system for living incognito. I maintain a modest apartment in the city where I meet new people, while my actual home is a secluded property outside town. I drive a reliable but unimpressive car for daily use, saving my luxury vehicles for private enjoyment. I often work from coffee shops dressed in simple jeans and sweaters, observing how everyday people interact with technology. It was in this undercover boss mode that I first met Nikita. And despite all my success, despite building a company valued at billions, despite changing the landscape of digital privacy, meeting him was the luckiest moment of my life. But it came with a complication. How do you tell someone you've been hiding your true self, or should you? The loneliness of success was something I hadn't anticipated. As my company grew, my circle of trusted friends shrank. People I thought were close turned into networking opportunities or investment pitches. Dating became a minefield. I never knew if someone was interested in me or my bank account. After several disastrous relationships with men who either resented my success or tried to capitalize on it, I had almost given up on finding someone who would see me for who I really was. That's why maintaining the secret with Nikita has been both a blessing and a burden. A blessing because for once, I'm loved for my personality, my quirks, my heart, not my net worth. A burden because every day the deception grows heavier. But as we drive toward his family home, I wonder if perhaps this final test will give me the courage to finally reveal everything. It was a rainy Tuesday when fate decided to introduce me to Nikita. I was working from the Daily Grind, a small coffee shop downtown where I often went to escape my office and observe how regular people use technology. Dressed in worn jeans, a plain sweater, and zero makeup, I was completely incognito, just another face in the crowd. I was deep into coding a new privacy algorithm when a tall figure stumbled against my table, sending a full cup of coffee cascading onto my laptop. I gasped as the liquid seeped between the keys of my $3,000 machine, not that anyone would know its value from its deliberately worn exterior. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." The voice was warm with a slight accent I couldn't immediately place. I looked up to see the most genuine pair of brown eyes I'd ever encountered, wide with horror at what had just happened. He grabbed napkins frantically, trying to mop up the spill while I rescued my computer. "I'm such an idiot, I wasn't looking, please let me pay for the repairs. Or a new one if it's ruined." I should have been upset, but something about his sincere distress made me smile instead. "It's okay," I said, patting the laptop dry. "I have everything backed up." What I didn't say was that I had the resources to buy 100 more, just like it, without blinking. "I'm Nikita," he said, extending his hand once the crisis had been somewhat contained. "Nikita Petrov, and I insist on making this right." His name suited him, strong yet gentle somehow. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that fell slightly into his eyes, and that accent which I now recognized as Russian, albeit very faint. "Sarah," I replied, shaking his hand, "and honestly, don't worry about it." He wouldn't take no for an answer, insisting on at least buying me another coffee and a pastry while I assessed the damage. As we talked, he revealed he was a high school history teacher at Brighton Prep, one of the city's better schools. "I teach world history and Russian literature." He explained, a passion lighting his eyes that I found instantly attractive. Most of my students think history is just memorizing dates, but I try to make them see the stories, the human elements behind the events. When he asked about my work, I gave my practiced response. "I do tech consulting, mostly remote work. It's pretty boring stuff, really." This was my standard cover, vague enough to be believable, specific enough to avoid follow-up questions. That first meeting turned into coffee the following week, which became dinner the week after. I found myself drawn to Nikita in a way I hadn't experienced before. He was passionate about education, knowledgeable about history and literature, and completely unpretentious. When he took me to dinner, he chose small, authentic ethnic restaurants, rather than trying to impress with expensive venues. On our fourth date, we hiked to a viewpoint overlooking the city. As we sat sharing a simple picnic he'd prepared, Nikita pointed out historical landmarks and told stories about the city's development that made the landscape come alive. I realized I hadn't thought about work or money once all day, a rarity in my usual life. As our relationship deepened, maintaining my cover story became more challenging. I had to be careful about my flexible schedule, explaining it away as the benefit of freelance work. When he visited my decoy apartment, I made sure it looked lived in but modest, nothing that would raise questions. I kept a separate phone for work calls and made excuses when I needed to attend important meetings. The guilt of deception weighed on me, especially as I fell deeper in love with Nikita. He was the most authentic person I'd ever met, straightforward, honest, and genuine in everything he did. He talked openly about his teacher's salary, joking about budgeting for dates and saving for small luxuries. Meanwhile, I was sitting on a fortune I couldn't acknowledge. Several times I came close to telling him the truth. Once, after he spent hours helping a struggling student for no extra pay, I almost blurted out that I could fund an entire educational program for kids like that without noticing the cost. Another time, when his car broke down and he worried about the repair bill, I had to physically stop myself from offering to buy him a new one. But each time I held back. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment, but in truth, I was afraid. Afraid that knowing my wealth would change how he saw me. Afraid that he might feel inadequate, or that our dynamic would shift. Afraid most of all that what we had wasn't real enough to survive the truth. After a year together on an ordinary Tuesday evening, the anniversary of the coffee spill, Nikita cooked dinner at his modest one-bedroom apartment. He seemed nervous all night, checking the food repeatedly and fumbling with his words. As he served dessert homemade apple pie that was slightly burnt on the edges, he suddenly dropped to one knee beside the table. "Sarah," he said, his voice shaking slightly as he pulled out a small velvet box. "I never thought I'd be lucky enough to find someone like you. You're brilliant, kind, and you somehow find my historical tangents interesting." He laughed nervously. "I've been saving for this for months. It's not much, but..." He opened the box to reveal a modest diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" Looking at his hopeful face at the ring he'd sacrificed to buy, I felt both intense joy and crushing guilt. I was living a lie with the most honest person I knew, but in that moment all I could say was yes. As he slipped the ring on my finger, a ring that cost less than my daily coffee budget, I made a silent promise to find a way to tell him everything. But first he said it was time to meet his family. "My parents are a bit old-fashioned," Nikita explained as we planned our visit. "They immigrated from Russia when I was 5, and they still hold on to many traditional values." We were sitting in his small living room, surrounded by bookshelves, overflowing with history texts and classic literature. It was one of the things I loved about his apartment. The intellectual richness that contrasted with its physical simplicity. "Mom is the keeper of cultural traditions," he continued. "She still makes all the holiday foods from scratch and speaks Russian at home. Dad adapted more quickly to American life. He's business-minded and pragmatic." I nodded, taking mental notes. "And what do they know about me so far?" Nikita looked slightly uncomfortable. "Well, I've told them you're smart, beautiful, and that you work in tech. But I should warn you, they had certain expectations about who I'd end up with." "What kind of expectations?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "My mother especially. She's always hoped I'd marry someone from a good family, preferably Russian, or at least someone with similar cultural background." He made air quotes around "good family," his expression apologetic. "They worry about me financially, especially since I chose teaching over joining my father's business." This was the first I'd heard about a family business. "What business is that?" "Oh, just some real estate stuff," he said vaguely. "Nothing exciting. The point is, they might be a bit judgmental at first, but they'll love you once they get to know you." His dismissive tone raised my curiosity, but I didn't press. Instead, I began forming a plan, one that would either prove Nikita's family worthy of him or expose their materialistic values. "What if..." I suggested carefully. I downplayed my background a bit, made myself seem more simple. Nikita looked confused. "What do you mean?" "Well, instead of a tech consultant from the city, what if I was an elementary school teacher from a small town? Someone more humble." I watched his reaction closely. "You want to pretend to be someone you're not." His brow furrowed. "Why would you do that?" I chose my words carefully. "I want them to judge me for who I am, not what I do or where I'm from. If they're as concerned about status as you suggest, this would be a way to see their true characters." I didn't add that I was already pretending to be someone I wasn't, just in the opposite direction. Nikita seemed torn. "I don't know, Sarah. Lying to my parents..." "Not lying," I corrected. "Just a small test. If they embrace me despite thinking I'm a simple country girl, then we know their approval isn't conditional on status. They should love me for me, right?" After much discussion, Nikita reluctantly agreed. "But only for the initial meeting, he insisted. I don't want to build a relationship with my parents on deception." The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me. Over the next 2 weeks, I crafted my alternate persona meticulously. I shopped for appropriate clothes, floral dresses, simple cardigans, and modest shoes that a teacher might wear. I practiced speaking with fewer technical terms and created a backstory about growing up in a small town in Wisconsin and teaching 3rd grade at a local elementary school. As the day approached, Nikita shared more about his family dynamics. "Mom can be a bit intense," he warned. She'll definitely ask about your family, your education, your future plans. And your father? I asked. Dad is quieter but observant. He's always evaluating people looking for their potential or usefulness. Nikita seemed embarrassed by his own description. Sorry, that sounds terrible. They're good people really, just traditional and a bit status conscious. I also learned about his younger brother Alexei, who apparently worked with their father and was, according to Nikita, the perfect son in his parents' eyes. The night before our visit, I called my assistant to clear my schedule for the weekend, explaining only that I was meeting my fiancé's family. Claire, who knew my real identity and my relationship deception, sounded concerned. Are you sure about this, Sarah meeting his family while still hiding who you really are? It's just for a little longer, I assured her. After this weekend, I'll tell Nikita everything. And what if his family disapproves of the simple you, what then? I hadn't considered that possibility. Then I'll know they're not the kind of people I want as in-laws. And if they love the fake you but would hate the real you? I had no answer for that. The next morning, Nikita and I loaded our overnight bags into his aging Honda Civic and set off for what he described as the suburbs. I wore a simple blue dress with minimal jewelry, my hair pulled back in a modest ponytail. The engagement ring, the one modest possession I never removed, glinted in the morning sunlight. As we drove, Nikita seemed increasingly nervous, constantly checking his appearance in the rearview mirror and repeatedly asking if his parents would like me. They will, I assured him, though I was beginning to have doubts about my plan. Tell me more about where you grew up. It's just a regular neighborhood, he said vaguely. We had a nice enough house, nothing fancy. After 2 hours of driving, we turned off the highway into what was clearly an extremely wealthy area. The houses, or rather estates, were set far back from the road behind manicured hedges and imposing gates. This is where you grew up? I asked, unable to keep the surprise from my voice. Nikita shifted uncomfortably. My parents did well for themselves after we moved here. Dad's business took off when I was in high school. Before I could press for details, we turned onto a private road marked Petrov Estate and approached an ornate iron gate that swung open automatically as we approached. My heart began to race as we drove up a winding driveway lined with perfectly trimmed topiary. At the end stood not a house, but a mansion, a sprawling stone structure that looked like it belonged on a historical tour. Nikita, I said slowly, I think you've downplayed your family's success a bit. He gave me a sheepish look. I didn't want you to think differently of me. Money changes how people see you. The irony of his words hit me like a physical blow. All this time, we'd both been hiding the same secret, afraid of the same thing. As we parked beside several luxury vehicles, my plan to pose as a simple country girl suddenly seemed not just dishonest, but potentially disastrous. What had I gotten myself into? Stepping out of Nikita's modest Honda felt like entering another world. The vehicle looked comically out of place next to the gleaming Bentley and Mercedes in the circular driveway. A uniformed man, an actual butler, appeared as if from nowhere to take our bags. Welcome home, Mr. Nikita, he said with a slight bow. Your parents are waiting in the main parlor. Nikita thanked him with the casual ease of someone accustomed to such service, then turned to me with an apologetic smile. I should have prepared you better. Is this too much? Too much was an understatement. We walked through manicured gardens featuring classical sculptures and a fountain that could have belonged in a European palace. The house itself was an architectural masterpiece of stone and glass, at least 15,000 square feet of obvious wealth and taste. It's impressive. I managed, still processing this revelation about my fiancé's background. Why did you never tell me? He squeezed my hand gently. The same reason I live in my apartment instead of here. I didn't want to be the rich kid anymore. I wanted to make my own way be valued for myself, not my family's money. His expression was earnest. You understand that, right? I did understand, perhaps better than he could possibly know. A uniformed maid opened massive double doors and we entered a foyer with soaring ceilings and a crystal chandelier that probably cost more than Nikita's yearly teaching salary. The floors were marble, the walls adorned with what appeared to be original artwork by masters I recognized from museum visits. But what stopped me cold was the portrait hanging prominently above a grand staircase. I recognized the distinguished silver-haired man immediately, Viktor Petrov, founder of Petrov International Real Estate, one of the largest development companies in the world. Last year, Viktor had been a keynote speaker at the same exclusive tech conference, where I'd reluctantly accepted an innovation award. We'd been briefly introduced at the VIP reception. Though our interaction was brief, I remembered him as surprisingly down-to-earth for someone of his stature, and now I was standing in his home, pretending to be a school teacher, about to meet him as his son's fiancée. "Sarah, are you okay?" Nikita asked, noticing my frozen stance. Before I could respond, a regal-looking woman with impeccable posture and perfectly coiffed dark hair appeared from a side doorway. She wore an elegantly tailored dress that I recognized as a custom Valentino creation worth at least $20,000. "Nikita, darling," she said, her Russian accent more pronounced than her son's. She embraced him formally, kissing both cheeks before turning her assessing gaze to me. The slight downturn of her lips told me everything about her first impression of my simple blue dress and minimal makeup. "You must be Sarah," she said, extending manicured fingers for a limp handshake rather than an embrace. "I am Natalia Petrovna. Welcome to our home." "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Petrov," I replied deliberately, using my most modest, slightly nervous demeanor. "Your home is beautiful. Please, this way," she said, leading us through a grand hallway lined with more artwork. Victor is eager to meet the woman who has captured our Nikita's heart. The main parlor was a showcase of old-world luxury antique furniture, silk draperies, and yet more priceless art. Standing by a fireplace large enough to roast an ox was Victor Petrov himself, looking exactly as he had at the conference in his bespoke suit. Next to him stood a younger man who could only be Alexei Nikita's brother, with the same dark features but a harder edge to his expression, and the unmistakable aura of someone accustomed to wealth and power. "Father Alexei," Nikita said, "this is Sarah, my fiancée." Victor stepped forward with a warm smile that quickly froze as our eyes met. I saw the flash of recognition cross his face, followed by the briefest moment of confusion. "Miss Sarah," he said carefully, recovering quickly as he took my hand. "What a pleasure to meet the woman Nikita has told us so little about." Our handshake lingered a moment longer than necessary as we engaged in a silent exchange. His subtle nod told me he wouldn't expose me, at least not immediately. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Petrov," I responded demurely. Alexei's greeting was less warm. He barely touched my hand, his gaze openly evaluating my appearance with obvious disappointment. "So Sarah," Natalia began, as we sat on priceless antique furniture. "Nikita tells us you're a teacher." She pronounced the word as if it were a questionable career choice, like professional gambler or street performer. "Yes, 3rd grade," I replied with practiced enthusiasm. "I love working with children." "How fulfilling," she said without conviction. "And where did you study? Wisconsin State?" I answered, naming a solid but unimpressive school. "I was fortunate to receive a scholarship." Natalia's eyebrow twitched. "A scholarship? How nice for you." She turned to her son. "Nikita, darling, why don't you show Sarah around while Alexei helps me check on dinner preparations?" As Nikita led me on a tour of the mansion, I was hyper-aware of both my deception and his. Each room revealed another layer of wealth: a professional-grade theater, an indoor pool, a wine cellar with bottles worth more than most cars. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked when we were momentarily alone in a sunroom overlooking manicured gardens. He looked genuinely troubled. "I wanted you to love me for me, not for all this." He gestured at the opulence surrounding us. "Once people know about my family, everything changes. They want introductions, investments, connections, or they treat me like I've never earned anything myself." His expression was earnest. "With you, it's been real. You love me for who I am, not what my family has." The irony was almost too much to bear. We'd both been hiding our wealth for exactly the same reasons. "I understand," I said softly, and I truly did. When we returned to the parlor, Victor was alone with a drink in hand. He fixed me with a knowing look. "So Sarah," he said carefully, "how exactly did you and my son meet?" As I recounted our coffee shop encounter, I could feel him studying me clearly, trying to reconcile the elementary school teacher before him with the tech CEO he'd met at the conference. Before he could ask more questions, a butler appeared to announce dinner was served. "Excellent," Victor said, offering his arm with old-world courtesy. As I took it, he whispered so only I could hear, "This should be an interesting evening, Ms. Reynolds." I felt my carefully constructed plan crumbling around me. The dining room could have hosted a state dinner. A massive table that seated 20 was set for 5 at one end, with fine china crystal and silver that belonged in a museum. Fresh flowers and ornate arrangements scented the air, and original oil paintings adorned walls covered in silk damask. Natalia directed the seating with the precision of a military commander Victor at the head herself at the foot. Nikita and me on one side, and Alexei opposite us. A staff of 3 served the meal with choreographed efficiency. "So, Sarah," Alexei began as the first course was served. "Nikita says you teach elementary school. That must be—" he paused, searching for a word. "Noisy." "The children are energetic," I replied with a warm smile. "But their curiosity and eagerness to learn make it worthwhile." "And the salary," he pressed, ignoring Nikita's warning glance. "Teaching isn't exactly lucrative, is it?" "Alexei," Nikita interjected sharply. "It's a fair question, brother. If you two are planning a future together, finances matter." I maintained my composed facade. "I make enough to live comfortably and do work that matters. Not everyone measures success by their bank account." Natalia jumped in before Alexei could respond. "Of course, dear. Very admirable. But practical considerations are important. Nikita has certain expectations of lifestyle that teaching salaries might not support." I glanced at Nikita, whose face had reddened with embarrassment or anger, perhaps both. "Mother, I've told you I'm happy with my life as it is. For now, perhaps," she countered smoothly. "But eventually, you might want a family, a proper home." She gestured around the dining room. "You grew up with certain advantages." The conversation shifted as Victor asked about my family background. I provided my fictional account of growing up in small-town Wisconsin with a father who worked in manufacturing and a mother who was a nurse. With each detail I shared, Natalia's expression grew more pinched. By the main course, a perfectly prepared beef Wellington that I barely tasted, the conversation had turned to business and real estate. Victor described a complex development project in Singapore that was facing regulatory hurdles. "The environmental impact assessments are proving problematic," he explained mostly to Alexei. "The local authorities are concerned about the wetland adjacency." "Buy them off," Alexei suggested casually. "Everyone has a price." I couldn't help myself. "Or you could incorporate the wetlands into the design," I suggested. "Sustainable development can actually increase property values while preserving ecosystems." The table fell silent as everyone turned to look at me. "I read about similar projects," I added hastily. "Case studies in urban planning." Victor's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "An interesting suggestion. Most developers see environmental concerns as obstacles rather than opportunities." "Our 3rd-grade teacher is a real estate expert now," Alexei scoffed. Natalia quickly redirected the conversation. "Nikita tells us you've been together for over a year. That's quite a while to date before meeting the family." "Her tone carried an accusation that Nikita immediately addressed. "We wanted to be sure about our relationship before taking this step." "And where will you live after the wedding?" Natalia pressed in. "Surely not that tiny apartment of yours." "We haven't decided yet," Nikita replied tensely. "You could always accept your father's standing offer to join the business," Alexei suggested. "A regional director position would solve your financial situation." He glanced pointedly at me. I felt Nikita stiffen beside me. "I've told you repeatedly I have no interest in real estate development. I'm a teacher because I choose to be." "A noble profession," Victor interjected, surprising everyone. "Education shapes the future more than any building ever could." Natalia looked displeased by her husband's support. "Speaking of the future," she pivoted. "What are your thoughts on children? Sarah Nikita was raised with certain cultural traditions. Our family values are important to us." Essen. The implication was clear. She was questioning whether I was suitable mother material for her grandchildren. "I love children," I answered honestly. "That's why I became a teacher. As for traditions, I believe in respecting heritage while creating new family customs together." The conversation continued in this vein throughout the rest of the main course, Natalia probing for weaknesses in my background or character, Alexei making condescending remarks, and Victor observing with surprising neutrality. When dessert was served, an elaborate chocolate sculpture that was almost too beautiful to eat, Natalia shifted tactics. "You know, Katerina Sokolova asked about Nikita just last week," she mentioned casually. "Her family's pharmaceutical company just went public. Lovely girl, classically trained pianist degree from Oxford." I felt Nikita's hand find mine under the table and squeeze reassuringly. "Mother, I'm engaged to Sarah. Your matchmaking days are over." "I'm simply making conversation," Natalia replied innocently. "There's no harm in knowing your options." "I don't have options," Nikita said firmly. "I've made my choice." The tension around the table was palpable. I excused myself to use the restroom, desperate for a moment alone to collect my thoughts. As I wandered down a hallway lined with more artwork, I realized I had taken a wrong turn. Opening what I thought might be the powder room, I instead found myself in a wood-paneled study lined with books and featuring a massive desk. I was about to retreat when a voice behind me made me freeze. Interesting to find the CEO of Privacy Shield Technologies in my office pretending to be a school teacher. I turned to find Viktor Petrov closing the door behind him, a knowing smile on his face. "Mr. Petrov," I began, but he held up a hand to stop me. "Please, Viktor," he said, his expression more curious than accusatory. "And I believe we've already met Ms. Reynolds. Last year's Tech Future conference, if I recall correctly. Your privacy encryption system presentation was quite impressive. There was no point denying it. You have a good memory. I make it my business to remember remarkable people," he replied, moving to a sidebar where he poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into crystal tumblers. He offered one to me. "I think we could both use this about now." I accepted the glass, an exceptional scotch, I noted automatically, and took a careful sip. "So," he continued, leaning against his desk, "would you care to explain why one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs in the country is pretending to be a school teacher to my family?" I considered my options and decided on honesty. "For the same reason your son pretends to live on a teacher's salary when he's heir to a billion-dollar real estate empire." Victor's eyebrows rose. Then he laughed, a genuine warm sound I hadn't expected. "Touché. My son hasn't exactly been forthcoming about his background, has he?" "No more than I have," I admitted. "When we met, I was working incognito at a coffee shop, something I do regularly to stay connected to how real people use technology. He spilled coffee on my laptop and we started talking. I smiled at the memory. He was just a kind, passionate history teacher who saw me as an ordinary person. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my life?" Victor nodded thoughtfully. "I understand better than you might think. When I first came to this country, I had nothing. Then I built something significant, and suddenly everyone wanted a piece of me, not Victor the person, but Victor the resource." He studied me with new appreciation. "So you maintained the deception to preserve the authenticity." "Exactly. And then tonight I suggested pretending to be even more ordinary as a test for your family's values." I shook my head at the irony. I had no idea I was walking into this. I gestured at the opulent office. "Nikita has always been different." Victor explained, his expression softening when speaking of his son. "Alexei embraced our wealth and the advantages it brings. But Nikita, he's always been troubled by privilege he didn't earn. After college, he rejected the position I'd prepared for him in the company, insisted on making his own way." Pride was evident in Victor's voice. "He even refused access to his trust fund until he turns 35. "He never told me any of this," I said quietly. "Did you tell him about your empire?" Victor countered with a knowing look. "Touché again," I conceded. Victor sipped his scotch contemplatively. "So we have an interesting situation. My son, who hides his wealth to be valued for himself, has fallen in love with a woman doing exactly the same thing." He chuckled. "The universe has a sense of humor." "What happens now?" I asked. "Are you going to expose me?" He considered this for a moment. "I think not. At least not immediately. I'm curious to see how this plays out." His eyes twinkled with mischief. "My wife has been insufferable about finding Nikita a suitable match. Her face when she learns who you really are will be priceless." "You don't disapprove then?" I couldn't help asking. "Disapprove? Isu?" Victor looked genuinely surprised. "My dear, you've built a remarkable company from nothing. You understand both sides of wealth, its creation and its burden. And most importantly, you and my son found each other authentically, without the distortion of money." He raised his glass in a toast. I couldn't have chosen better myself. Our conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Victor quickly took the glass from my hand and placed it out of sight. "Come in," he called. The door opened to reveal Nikita looking concerned. "There you are. Mum's asking where you went." He glanced between us suspiciously. "Everything okay?" "Your father was just showing me his first edition Dostoevsky." I improvised. I mentioned I enjoyed Crime and Punishment in college. Victor smoothly walked to a bookshelf and pulled down an aged volume. "Beautiful craftsmanship," he said, displaying the book. "Sarah has a surprising appreciation for Russian literature." Nikita seemed relieved but still puzzled by our apparent rapport. "We should head back. Dessert is being served." Victor placed a hand on my shoulder as I passed. "Let's continue our literary discussion later," he said meaningfully. As we returned to the dining room, I felt the weight of secrets building, both Victor's and mine. The evening was becoming increasingly complicated, and I had no idea how it would end. Natalia looked annoyed at our extended absence. "There you are. The soufflé waits for no one, not even literary discussions." "My apologies, Mother," Nikita said as we resumed our seats. Throughout dessert, the conversation grew even more pointed. Natalia had apparently decided to abandon subtlety. "You know, Sarah," she said while delicately consuming her chocolate soufflé, "teaching is such a transient profession for many women, especially once children arrive." "I find it quite fulfilling," I replied evenly, "and many of the best teachers at my school are mothers who bring that perspective to their classrooms." "Perhaps," Natalia continued, "but surely you recognize that Nikita has certain potentials he hasn't yet realized. The right partner would encourage him toward greater ambitions." Nikita set down his fork with a clatter. "Mother, enough. I've told you repeatedly that I have no interest in joining the family business. I'm proud of my work as a teacher." Yes, molding young minds," she said dismissively. "Very noble. But darling, you could do so much more. Your father built an empire for you and your brother." "For Alexei, maybe," Nikita countered. "He's always been the son you wanted." Alexei smirked. "Someone in the family has to be practical. While you're grading papers, I'm closing 9-figure deals." I felt a surge of protectiveness toward Nikita. Successful as I was, I understood the pressure of family expectations. "There's nobility in purpose, not just profit," I said, abandoning some of my simple teacher persona. "Nikita changes lives directly through his work." Alexei's eyes narrowed. "That's a convenient philosophy when you can't compete in the real world." "Alexei," Victor warned, but his younger son continued. "Let's be honest, teaching is what people do when they can't handle real business pressure. It's the safe choice." I saw Nikita's expression harden, his knuckles white around his water glass. Before he could respond, I found myself speaking. "Actually, I think real estate development and education have interesting parallels," I said calmly. "Both shape environments that influence human potential. The difference is in timescale and measurement." Victor nodded appreciatively. "An insightful observation." "Forgive me," Natalia interjected, "but what would an elementary school teacher know about real estate development?" I met her gaze steadily. "More than you might expect, Mrs. Petrov." "The Singapore project we were discussing earlier," Victor said, turning to me. "What would you suggest to resolve the wetland issue?" I recognized his intentional opening and decided to take it. "I'd implement a biophilic design approach," I replied, dropping more of my facade. "Integrate the natural wetland as an asset rather than an obstacle. Studies show proximity to natural elements increases property values by 20 to 30%. You could create a development that preserves the ecosystem while offering premium pricing for units with wetland views." A stunned silence fell over the table. "That's actually what our environmental consultants recommended," Alexei said suspiciously. "How would you know that?" Natalia's eyes narrowed. "Yes, Sarah. How exactly does a third-grade teacher from Wisconsin develop such specific knowledge of international real estate development?" I felt the moment of truth approaching. Nikita looked completely confused by the turn in conversation. Victor watched with barely concealed amusement. Before I could respond, the butler appeared with coffee service, momentarily diffusing the tension. But as he withdrew, all eyes returned to me, awaiting an explanation. The game was up. It was time for honesty. "You're right," I said, setting down my coffee cup. "It would be unusual for an elementary school teacher to have that knowledge." I felt Nikita tense beside me, clearly confused by where this was going. "The truth is," I continued, meeting his eyes, "I haven't been entirely honest about who I am." "What do you mean?" Nikita asked, his expression a mixture of concern and bewilderment. I took a deep breath. "I'm not just a tech consultant. I'm the founder and CEO of Privacy Shield Technologies." Alexei nearly choked on his coffee. Privacy Shield. The company that developed the encryption system that half the Fortune 500 uses. "Sarah, what are you talking about?" Nikita looked completely lost. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," I said, focusing only on him despite the audience. "When we met, I was working incognito at that coffee shop, something I do regularly to observe how people use technology in natural settings. When you spilled coffee on my laptop, you were seeing the real me, just not the whole picture." "You're saying you're—" Nikita struggled to process this information. "I'm a tech entrepreneur," I confirmed. "My company is valued at over $3 billion. I personally make around $1 million a month." Natalia's jaw literally dropped. Alexei stared at me like I'd suddenly grown a second head. Victor, the only one not surprised, sipped his coffee with poorly concealed enjoyment of the scene unfolding. "Why would you hide this?" Nikita asked, his voice strained. "Why pretend to be someone else for an entire year?" "For the same reason you never told me you were the son of Viktor Petrov," I answered gently. "Because once people know you have money, everything changes. They don't see you anymore. They see your bank account, your connections, what you can do for them." I reached for his hand, but he pulled back slightly. "With you for the first time, I was just Sarah. Not a CEO, not an investor, not a successful woman to be either resented or exploited. Just me." Nikita stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I need some air," he said, avoiding my eyes before walking quickly from the dining room. I moved to follow him, but Victor placed a restraining hand on my arm. "Give him a moment," he advised quietly. An uncomfortable silence settled over the table until Natalia, recovering her composure with remarkable speed, leaned toward me with newly appraising eyes. "Privacy shield," she repeated, her tone completely transformed. "I had no idea we were hosting such a distinguished guest. You must tell us all about your company." Her smile was dazzling. Her previous disdain vanished without a trace. "Actually, Mrs. Petrov, I should check on Nikita," I said, rising from my chair. Of course," she agreed too readily. "But please call me Natalia. We're practically family." The speed of her transformation from disapproving to fawning would have been comical under different circumstances. I found Nikita on the terrace staring out at the illuminated gardens. He heard my approach but didn't turn. "Were you ever going to tell me?" he asked quietly. I moved beside him, keeping a respectful distance. "Yes, I've wanted to tell you so many times. Especially after you proposed." I paused, gathering my thoughts. But the longer it went on, the harder it became. I was afraid of losing what we had, something real in a world where so little is. He finally turned to face me, his expression troubled. "You do see the irony here, right? I've spent my entire adult life running from my family's wealth, trying to be valued for myself rather than my last name or bank account. And all this time I've been dating someone doing exactly the same thing. Despite everything, I couldn't help smiling. Your father pointed out the same thing. He knew. When did you tell him?" "He recognized me," I explained. "We met briefly at a tech conference last year. He figured it out as soon as I arrived." Nikita ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd come to associate with his frustration. "So I'm the only one who didn't know." "Great." "Nikita," I said softly, "I fell in love with you because of who you are. Passionate, kind, brilliant, about history, terrible at making coffee without spilling it. None of that had anything to do with money, yours or mine." A reluctant smile tugged at his lips. "I am pretty bad with coffee." I took a tentative step closer. "Can you understand why I kept it secret? In my experience, money changes everything. Men either resent my success or try to benefit from it. Finding someone who saw just me, who loved me for myself, it felt too precious to risk." "I do understand," he admitted after a long moment. "Probably better than most people would. But relationships need trust, Sarah. How can we build a life together if we're both hiding fundamental parts of ourselves?" "You're right," I acknowledged. "No more secrets. From now on, complete honesty." We were interrupted by the terrace doors opening. Natalia emerged, her smile radiant as she approached us. "Sarah, darling," she gushed, taking my hands in hers. "You simply must tell us more about your fascinating company. Victor was just saying we should discuss investment opportunities. Perhaps you'd consider allowing Petrov International to become a strategic partner." The contrast between her current enthusiasm and her earlier disdain couldn't have been more stark. I glanced at Nikita, who was watching his mother with a mixture of disbelief and disgust. "Actually, Mother," he said coldly, "Sarah and I were having an important private conversation." Of course," she said, not moving an inch. "But dinner is hardly finished. The staff has prepared a special cognac to accompany—" "We're leaving," Nikita interrupted firmly. Natalia's smile faltered. "Leaving, but you've only just arrived. We've prepared the East Wing guest suite." "I said we're leaving." He repeated his tone, brooking no argument. "Sarah, would you like to go?" I nodded, grateful for his decisiveness. "Nikita, don't be absurd," Natalia protested. "We're just getting to know your wonderful fiancée. I had no idea she was so accomplished. You should have told us immediately she was the Sarah Reynolds." "That's exactly the problem, Mother," Nikita said, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "An hour ago she wasn't good enough for your precious son because you thought she was just a teacher. Now that you know she's wealthy, suddenly she's wonderful. That's exactly why I left all this behind." Victor and Alexei had appeared at the terrace doors, watching the confrontation unfold. "Son," Victor began, but Nikita cut him off. "No, father. I won't subject Sarah to this. We're going to a hotel tonight, and we'll talk tomorrow when everyone has had time to reflect on their behavior." "Don't be so sensitive," Alexei scoffed. "Mother's just excited to learn Sarah isn't going to be a financial burden on you." "Unlike you, Alexei, I don't measure people's worth by their bank accounts," Nikita shot back. "Clearly," his brother retorted, "or you wouldn't be wasting your talents teaching history to privileged teenagers when you could be running a division of Petrov International." "That's enough," Victor said sharply. He turned to us with an apologetic expression. "Nikita, Sarah, please stay, but I understand if you prefer to leave." Nikita looked at me questioningly. I squeezed his hand in response. "We'll be going, babe," he said firmly. "Good night." As we walked through the mansion to collect our overnight bags, Natalia followed, alternating between apologies and attempts to convince us to stay. By the time we reached Nikita's car, I was exhausted by the emotional whiplash of the evening. Once we were driving away from the estate, a heavy silence fell between us. I stared out the window at the passing darkness, wondering if our relationship could survive this mutual deception. Finally, Nikita spoke. "Well, that wasn't quite how I imagined introducing you to my family." Despite everything, I couldn't help laughing, a release of tension that soon had us both in cathartic fits of laughter at the absurdity of the situation. When we could speak again, Nikita shook his head in wonder. "So, $1 million a month, huh? Give or take," I admitted. "And you're the heir to a real estate empire. Trust fund doesn't activate until I'm 35. He corrected with a half smile. "I really do live on my teacher's salary right now." We looked at each other for a moment at a red light, and I saw in his eyes the same question that was in mine. Where do we go from here? We checked into a luxury hotel, my choice, since I was no longer hiding my financial status. As the door closed behind us, the full weight of our revelations hung in the air between us. Nikita sat heavily on the edge of the king-sized bed, loosening his tie with a sigh. "So," he began, "Privacy Shield Technologies. I looked up your company once after a student did a presentation on tech innovations. Had no idea I was dating the founder. And I had no idea I was dating a Petrov," I countered gently, sitting beside him. "All those times you worried about affording dinner." He shook his head. "I wasn't lying about that. I really do live on my teacher's salary. I haven't touched my trust fund or family money since college." "I respect that," I said sincerely. "And all those times you said you had to work late on a project. Usually running a board meeting or negotiating international contracts," I admitted sheepishly. Nikita laughed softly. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? Both hiding the same secret from each other." "For the same reasons," I added. "To be seen for who we are, not what we're worth." "The irony is," he said thoughtfully, "if we'd both been honest from the start, we might have recognized kindred spirits immediately." I nodded, feeling the truth of his words. "Nikita, I need to know, does this change things between us? Finding out who I really am?" He took my hand, studying the modest engagement ring he'd given me. A ring I now knew had cost him several months of his actual salary. "When I proposed," he said slowly, "I was worried about giving you such a simple ring. I thought about breaking my rule and using family money just that once." "I love this ring," I said fiercely, "because you chose it for me, the me you knew." "And that's your answer," he replied, meeting my eyes. I fell in love with Sarah, the tech consultant, who challenged my historical theories and laughed at my bad jokes. The woman who volunteers at the literacy centre on Saturdays and cries at documentaries about elephants. He squeezed my hand. "Your bank account doesn't change any of that." Relief washed through me. "So we're okay." "We need to work on the trust thing," he said honestly. "But yes, we're okay." He paused. "Though I might need some time to process the fact that my fiancé is richer than my family." I laughed. "I doubt that. Petrov International is worth, 20 billion, 22 as of last quarter," he admitted. "But you're not far behind." We fell into a comfortable silence, the tension between us finally dissipating. "What do we do about your family?" I asked eventually. Nikita sighed. "I'm sorry about my mother. Her behavior was inexcusable. She's not the first person to change their tune when they discovered my net worth," I said, but I was disappointed to see how quickly her opinion of me transformed. "That's exactly why I distanced myself from that world," Nikita explained. "The constant evaluation of everyone based on their utility or status. It's exhausting and dehumanizing." "Your father seemed different," I observed. "He knew who I was but didn't expose me. Dad has always been more perceptive than he lets on, Nikita acknowledged. For all his business success, he's never lost sight of what really matters. He smiled slightly. He's going to love this whole situation once he gets over the shock. And Alexei, Nikita's expression darkened. Alexei has always embraced everything I rejected about wealth, the status, the power, the transactional relationships. We took different lessons from the same upbringing. I nodded thoughtfully. So where does this leave us? Do we continue with the wedding plans? I still want to marry you, Nikita said without hesitation. If anything, knowing the full truth about each other removes the last barrier between us. He looked at me questioningly. Unless you've changed your mind. Not for a second, I assured him. But we have some practical matters to discuss. Where will we live? How will we handle our finances? Will you keep teaching? Will I keep running my company? Those are all good questions, he acknowledged. But tonight, I just want to be grateful that we found each other, two people hiding from the world, for the same reasons, somehow managing to see each other clearly despite our disguises. He pulled me close, and I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling truly seen for perhaps the first time in my adult life. What are the odds? I murmured. Both of us hiding our wealth, both afraid of how it would change things. Maybe not as unlikely as it seems, Nikita reflected. We were drawn to each other precisely because neither of us seemed impressed by status or wealth. We recognized something authentic in each other, even if we were both holding back parts of ourselves. As we talked into the night, planning our future with new honesty, my phone buzzed with a text from Victor. When you're ready to talk, I'm here. And for what it's worth, I approve wholeheartedly. Welcome to the family, the real family, not the facade. I showed the message to Nikita, who smiled. That's Dad. Always the diplomat. Should we respond? Tomorrow, he decided. Tonight is just for us, the real us, finally meeting without pretense. In that moment, I knew we would be all right. The deception that might have torn us apart had instead revealed a deeper truth. We had chosen each other for the right reasons, seeing past the distractions of wealth to the authentic person beneath. And that I realized was worth more than all our fortunes combined. The morning sun streamed through the hotel's floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating Nikita's peaceful sleeping face. For the first time since we'd met, I felt completely unburdened, no need to hide my schedule, disguise my knowledge, or downplay my success. It was liberating in a way I hadn't anticipated. I slipped out of bed and ordered room service, using the hotel's app, another small freedom I'd denied myself around Nikita before. As I sipped freshly brewed coffee on the suite's balcony overlooking the city where both our empires were headquartered, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us here. Nikita joined me just as the elaborate breakfast spread arrived. He raised an eyebrow at the feast. I see we're done pretending to be budget conscious. I smiled. I figured we could celebrate our first honest morning together. As we ate, we began the practical conversation we'd postponed the night before. So, Nikita said, spreading jam on a croissant, you run a multi-billion-dollar tech company and I teach high school history. How exactly does this work going forward? However we want it to, I replied. That's the beauty of our situation. We have complete freedom to design the life we want. Do you expect me to quit teaching? He asked directly, a hint of defensiveness in his tone. Absolutely not, I said firmly. Your passion for education is one of the things I love most about you. Why would I want you to give that up? His relief was visible. Some women might not want their husband earning a fraction of what they do. I'm not some women, I reminded him. Money has never been about status for me, it's about freedom and impact. I paused. Would it bother you, being married to someone who earns significantly more? He considered this thoughtfully. A year ago maybe, but I've done enough work on myself to recognize that would be my ego talking, not my values. He met my eyes. I'm secure enough in who I am to celebrate your success rather than feel threatened by it. Another weight lifted from my shoulders. So you keep teaching, I keep running Privacy Shield. But where do we live? Your apartment is too small for two people and my place. About that, Nikita said, looking curious. I've never actually seen where you really live. The apartment you showed me is my incognito place, I confirmed. Convenient for maintaining my cover and for working from cafes in the city. My actual home is about 30 minutes outside town, a modernist house on 10 acres with a view of the mountains. Of course it is, he said with a laugh. I'd like to see it the real you, real home, real life. Today, I promised. But first we should probably deal with your family. Nikita groaned. Do we have to? I'm still angry with my mother. Better to clear the air, I advised. Besides, I think your father and I could be allies. After breakfast, Nikita called his father, who suggested meeting for lunch at a neutral location, a private dining room at his club downtown. When we arrived, Victor was waiting alone. No, Mom? Nikita asked as we sat down. I thought it best to talk first without her. Particular energy, Victor explained diplomatically. She's still processing everything. You mean she's strategizing how to best exploit Sarah's connections? Nikita said bluntly. Victor sighed. Your mother has her flaws, but she loves you. In her mind, she's always working to secure the best future for you. By treating Sarah like she was beneath me until she found out about her money, I'm not defending her behavior, Victor clarified. Just explaining it. He turned to me. Sarah, I want to apologize for how yesterday unfolded. It wasn't the welcome to the family you deserved. Thank you, I said, appreciating his directness. But I share some of the blame. I came into your home under false pretenses. Victor smiled. As did my son to your life. Perhaps you're well matched in your mutual deceptions. He leaned forward. But now that the truth is out, we have an opportunity for a fresh start built on honesty this time. Over lunch, we discussed the future. Victor was refreshingly practical, focusing on how to navigate the public aspects of our relationship once the engagement became widely known. The business press will have a field day with this, he noted. The Petrov heir and the Privacy Shield founder, it's quite the power match. I've managed to keep a low profile so far, I said. I'd like to maintain as much privacy as possible. Understandable, Victor agreed. But some media attention is inevitable. Better to control the narrative than be blindsided. We developed a strategy for a small private wedding with a carefully crafted press release afterward. Victor even suggested having his PR team coordinate with mine to ensure consistent messaging. What about Mum? Nikita asked as our meal concluded. Victor's expression turned serious. She would like to apologize in person. She's genuinely mortified by her behavior. Is she sorry for how she treated Sarah? Or just sorry she didn't recognize a billionaire when she saw one? Nikita asked skeptically. Perhaps a bit of both, Victor admitted. But people can grow, Nikita, your mother included. We agreed to dinner at my house the following weekend, my real house this time. As Victor walked us out, he pulled me aside briefly while Nikita went ahead to get the car. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I couldn't have chosen better for my son if I'd tried. Not because of your success, impressive as it is, but because you understand him in a way few would. You both share the same burden of wealth and the same desire for authenticity. Thank you, I said, touched by his perception. That means a lot. Just one piece of advice, Res, he added. Don't let your shared secret become a barrier in a different way. Sometimes those of us who've hidden parts of ourselves for so long forget how to be fully visible even when it's safe. His insight struck me deeply. I'll remember that. That afternoon, I finally brought Nikita to my real home, the glass and stone modernist structure nestled in the foothills with panoramic views and technology integrated into every aspect. As we pulled up to the gate, I felt strangely nervous, as if this physical space might somehow change his perception of me. Nikita whistled low as we drove up the winding driveway. So this is the real Sarah Reynolds. Part of me, I corrected as I keyed in the security code. The house is impressive, but it's just a place. The woman you've known for the past year, that's still the real me. As we toured the house, I watched his reactions carefully. He seemed more curious than intimidated, asking thoughtful questions about design choices, rather than focusing on the obvious expense. In my home office, he paused at the wall of awards and magazine covers I'd never mentioned. Privacy Shield Woman of the Year for, he read, Most Innovative Company, Top 40 Under 40. He turned to me with a teasing smile. You've been hiding quite a lot, Ms. Reynolds. So have you, Mr. Petrov, I countered lightly. That evening, sitting on my terrace watching the sunset, Nikita turned to me with a serious expression. What are we going to do about the wedding I gave you a ring that probably costs less than your daily coffee budget? I held up my hand, the modest diamond catching the fading light. This ring means more to me than any expensive jewelry ever could. You chose it with love, saving for months on your actual salary. I leaned in to kiss him softly. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And the wedding itself, small and intimate, or the social event of the season. What do you want? I asked. He thought for a moment. I want what reflects us, the real us, not my mother's society extravaganza, not some billionaire showcase. Something meaningful that celebrates what we've found together. I couldn't agree more, I said, feeling a deep contentment settle over me. In the following weeks, we navigated our new reality with honesty and purpose. I introduced Nikita to my executive team and showed him my company. He brought me to his classroom to meet his students and colleagues. We merged our lives with intentional transparency, working through the practical details of prenuptial agreements and financial planning with maturity and mutual respect. When Natalia visited my home with Victor, her apology seemed genuine, if somewhat self-serving. But over time, as she saw how truly compatible Nikita and I were, her attitude shifted from calculation to reluctant admiration. By the time we announced our engagement publicly, she had become one of our strongest advocates. 6 months later, we married in a ceremony that perfectly reflected our journey, held at a historic library with just 50 guests, followed by a reception at a local children's education centre that we had jointly endowed. Nikita continued teaching and I kept running Privacy Shield, but we created a shared foundation focused on educational technology for underserved communities, combining our passions and resources. Looking back now, I can see that our mutual deception, problematic as it was, led us to a truth we might never have discovered otherwise. By hiding our wealth, we found something far more valuable, a partner who loved us for ourselves, who understood the unique challenges of privilege, and who shared our desire to make a meaningful impact beyond the accumulation of assets. In a world where so many relationships are transactional, we found something authentic by pretending to be less than we were, only to discover we were perfectly matched all along. The irony isn't lost on me, nor is the lesson sometimes the path to truth involves a necessary detour through deception. And if you're wondering if wealth has changed our day-to-day life, the answer is both yes and no. We still enjoy simple pleasures, hiking, reading by the fire, impromptu history debates over breakfast. But we've also embraced the freedom our resources provide, funding educational initiatives, supporting privacy advocacy, and creating technology that protects rather than exploits. Most importantly, we've learnt that real wealth has nothing to do with bank accounts. It's found in the rare gift of being truly seen and accepted for who you are, your strengths, your flaws, your dreams, and your fears. That's a fortune neither of us takes for granted. Have you ever hidden part of yourself only to discover someone else was doing the same thing? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey of deception, discovery, and acceptance resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe, to hear more real-life stories and share with someone who might need to remember that authentic connections can happen in the most unexpected ways. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the most valuable things are hidden in plain sight.